Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Parent Community Forum on reopening. My name is Bo Wright, Superintendent of Schools, and to my left is
Andy Whitmore, Assistant Superintendent of Finance and Operations.
Dina Wilson, Assistant Superintendent for Instruction.
Pat McHugh, Assistant Superintendent for Human Resources.
Good evening, families. Nerlanda and Salm, Assistant Superintendent of Student and Family Services.
All right. The first thing I'd like to do is to thank all of you for your patience and your flexibility and all the support that you've shown our district during a year that's been like any other. As you know, we plan to reopen for students in grades K through 6 who are in the hybrid program on Monday, April 19th for 4-day-a-week in-person instruction. And that's going to be the primary topic for our conversation here tonight. A few housekeeping items. We are in a room physically distanced, so as someone is talking, you'll see us unmasked. However, everyone else will keep their masks on, similar to what we do in our schools and classrooms on a day-to-day basis. We want this session to be interactive, so please submit questions through the chat. If there are any questions that we don't get to because we run out of time, please feel free to submit questions through the Contact Us button on our website. If we do get to a point where we exhaust our questions and we've shared all of the information that you're going to need to know, then we may finish a little early, and that will allow you to go out and enjoy some of this beautiful weather that we have here today. Before we jump into the questions, I just want to provide a little context to the conversation that we're going to have here tonight. We announced last evening that we would in fact be reopening in the elementary grades K-6 for those students in the hybrid program starting April 19th. As we said, Wednesdays will remain virtual learning days. We have been trying to bring back students in grades 7 through 12, but as you probably have heard, whether it be through news media outlets or through our own e-news communications, the new state guidance does not allow Monroe County schools to reopen at the secondary level because of higher than normal infection rates here in the county. So until those infection rates fall, we are not going to be able to fully reopen at the high school level. We'll be monitoring the situation and the status of a secondary reopening on a week-to-week basis, but the drop-dead date for reopening is going to be May 7th. If it looks like we're not going to be able to open before then we will contact families, and more than likely the decision will be made to remain hybrid for the rest of the year for secondary students if we can't do it before that point. Tomorrow and Friday are designated as asynchronous learning days, K-12. We wanted to make sure that our teachers, our staff, and our administrators had the opportunity to finalize instructional plans in order to make the transition successful. And we also want to make sure that our learning spaces are ready to go for Monday as well. Some folks have asked me via email, well, if 7-12 isn't going to fully reopen, then why are these days asynchronous for secondary students? And the answer is because we are still planning to try to reopen at the secondary level, and teachers are going to need that time to prepare. We haven't given up hope completely, even though we have some challenges in our way, and all of our teachers, staff members, and administrators are going to need time to prepare for that transition. So that is why it will be asynchronous at the secondary level as well. I do want to point out that we have some cohorts of students, those who are in cohort 3, these are some of our special education programs, students that attend the alternative program at the Webster Learning Center. These students have been attending 4 days a week all along, so those programs will be open for in-person attendance tomorrow and Thursday. We just want to clarify that for parents. Some key points that I want to talk about related to the new reopening guidance and our plan for reopening here in Rush-Henrietta. First and foremost, people have asked about mask wearing. Masks are still a requirement. They'll have to be worn. We will continue to provide short masking breaks as permitted in situations where distancing can be maintained. The State Department of Health will not be approving our amended reopening plans. As we communicated to you through e-news, we did submit an amended reopening plan over spring break. The local Department of Health will apparently not be approving those plans either. However, they will be in charge of enforcing these plans. And I expect more information to follow as far as what that actually means for school districts. The distancing has gone from 6 feet to 3 feet in elementary classrooms. At the secondary level, as I explained, because of the infection rates, distancing will remain at 6 feet. In cafeterias, we will continue with 3 feet distancing with barriers, which is allowable under the new guidance since we have been doing this all along effectively since September. We will continue to screen students who have not submitted attestations each school day, although Ms. Anselm is going to be talking to you about the critical importance of making sure that you complete the screener prior to students arriving at school, because it does place a burden on school personnel if we have to screen large numbers of kids that didn't complete before they came to school. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Snack time at the elementary level is going to have to look a little different based on the guidance. In classrooms where distancing at 6 feet or more can be maintained, then snack time can happen. In the event that distancing can't be maintained, then classrooms will have to have snack in other areas of the building, like common areas where they can distance, the cafeteria, or outdoor spaces as well. Distancing in physical education and in music up until this point has been at 12 feet. In accordance with the new guidance, the distance has gone down to 6 feet in those classes when students are singing or participating in physical activities. Breakfast in all schools will be eaten in the cafeteria. That will be a little bit of a change for some of our elementary buildings as they were eating in classrooms at certain points. And there is no requirement for students and staff to be tested for COVID under the new guidance. So having communicated some of those key points that people seem to be wondering about, we will begin opening up the Q&A portion of the session. And it looks like we're already starting to get some questions in. First question, are you planning to use barriers in elementary school, or with the recent guidance that barriers aren't required, will they not be used? It further isolated young children already learning to connect with masks and distancing. So the new guidance does not require barriers in an elementary classroom. As I said, we'll continue to utilize barriers in all of our cafeteria spaces. That's been a practice that we've been implementing and using since September, and it's been effective in our cafeterias, so that will continue. In classrooms, we're not required to use barriers. However, we may use them at certain points. An example of a way that we may use a barrier in a classroom is at, say, an intervention table where students are working in small groups with a teacher for, say, 15, 20 minutes. And we'll be distanced at 3 feet, but we'll have barriers there at the table. And we also will have barriers available if teachers want to use them for other activities where it may be appropriate. But there is no longer a requirement at the elementary level or any other level for that matter, to use barriers in cases where distancing can't be maintained. So while we're waiting for some more questions to come in, I want to talk about some frequently asked questions, which oftentimes are emailed to us. One of them centers around Wednesdays. And so parents have asked us, what prompted the decision to go with 4 days a week of in-person instruction as opposed to 5? And so while we have a lull here, I'll address that question. There are a couple of reasons for that. First and foremost, we've been using these Wednesdays as an opportunity to provide intervention remotely to those students who need it, and we see great value in that. It also provides us with an opportunity to manage the physical spaces in buildings. There's a lot more that goes into cleaning and organizing spaces this year, and it's a lot easier to move things around and to clean and to disinfect when you have less people in the building. So those were a couple of the reasons, but then the primary reason is because the Remote Learning Academy was going to remain on a 4-day-a-week schedule, and if we went 5 days a week hybrid, there are staff that are shared between those two models, and so we wouldn't have been able to share staff if we had the RLA on a 4-day schedule and had everybody else on a 5. Okay, it looks like we had a question that was submitted. Why are we changing elementary age children's schedules and making this push for 4 days a week when we are so close to the end of the school year? That's a really good question, and there's been some debate about whether or not we should come back within our community and within the communities around us. And I understand the concerns on all sides. There are people who have pushed really hard to get students back in schools, and there are folks who have concerns about us returning prior to the end of the year. But we feel strongly that we have and I've communicated this in some of my e-news communications, we feel strongly that we have a moral obligation to get kids back to school. We want to give our kids the best learning opportunities possible, and if we're able to do it safely before the end of the year, then we feel like we should bring them back. We also want to address, the social, emotional, and mental wellness issues that many students are having. So we want them in a place where we can support them in that way with mental health specialists. We feel like that's equally as important right now to everything that we're doing instructionally. And then lastly, whether we're talking about students or we're talking about teachers or we're talking about families or anybody else that's a part of our school community, we feel like we need to get people reacclimated to a typical school situation and to kind of take this as an opportunity to figure out the best ways to support students as they get used to being back in school pretty close to full time. I think it gives us an opportunity to see what our buildings are going to need, to see what our students are going to need, and to hit the ground running as far as planning goes for September. Okay. Looks like we're starting to get a little bit more action in the chat. How will this change the mask breaks that our kids are much needed getting throughout the day with more kids in a classroom? Well, it means that students will have to remain at 6 feet distance when we take these masking breaks, which will present a little bit more of a challenge in terms of doing that in a classroom. I don't think you're going to see much change at the secondary level right now because we still will be in a hybrid model where you have limited numbers of students in rooms. We're going to have to be a little bit more creative at the elementary level. I've been spending the week touring buildings, and in many classrooms, there are still opportunities for students to take masking breaks either individually or in small groups and still maintain that distancing. However, there may be situations where they can't, and in those cases, we would have to utilize other spaces in school buildings in order to give students masking breaks. I mentioned earlier in the program that I wanted to follow up on the issue of screening, because in some of our buildings, and it isn't really an issue, most of the students are completing the screener every morning, but we do have buildings where we have lots of students every morning whose parents aren't completing the screener. And it does present challenges for us at the school level. So Ms. Anselmo, I'm going to have you talk a little bit about that and the importance of completing the screener.
And for families who participated with us when we had a similar community forum in August, and if you recall, as we talked about reopening, one of the things that we said is that we really needed to be a partner this year in light of the issue of the pandemic that we were dealing with. And one of that requirement was the health screener. As you know, we have partnered with a third-party vendor, and every morning you're supposed to receive the Raptor screening questionnaire so that you can complete it for your individual child or children. And so we know that it hasn't been without any glitches. We've had glitches along the way, and every time we reach out to the vendor to fix them right away, because this is an important piece. And the reason why we're asking, as we enter 4 days a week, where we have more children in the building, that you complete this, is because, again, this has helped us to keep our schools open from September. There has been no tracing of transmission happening in schools. We have partnered with the local health department very closely when there is a case to be able to do the contact tracing and get support for these individuals so that they can get the help that they need, or isolate or quarantine, whatever needs to happen. So it is imperative, parents, that you complete this screener and do a temperature checks in the morning. Because if your child is presenting with symptoms of COVID, the whole purpose of this process is to ensure that they remain home, that they get well, and that they are not placed on the bus or come into the building. Again, that is in an effort to keep everyone safe and to keep schools open for the rest of the school year, especially now that we're going back 4 days. So I can't say enough how important it is, and we implore you, because again, since we are doubling up on the number of students that are in school, the school nurse teachers were doing the temperature screening every morning for those who did not complete the screening. They will not have as much time. What we want them to do is spending time taking care of the medical needs of each individual child every single day. So if you can at least help us with that, we would truly, truly appreciate it.
Thank you for that explanation. Some more questions coming in within the chat. What in the state guidelines that came out last Friday made you think that K-6 may have challenges to open? The email Monday created a lot of stress and frustration. I apologize for that, but we also, once the new guidance came out, there were some lingering questions that had to be answered. Monroe County Superintendents had a virtual meeting on Sunday. We looked at, those areas where we were going to have to seek clarification, and we still didn't have answers to those questions as of Monday. Some questions related to distancing in classrooms and cafeterias, and some questions related to transportation and some other issues as well. And so we wanted to make sure that families were updated and were able to begin planning, and knew where we stood related to the guidance, but we also didn't want to guarantee that we would be able to open more fully at the elementary level if there were going to be some snags based on the new guidance. We needed to confirm that we were going to be able to move forward. So that's why we wanted to communicate that there could be some challenges which would make it difficult for us to open. And then that next day, once we were able to confirm that we were able to move ahead, then that's why we sent the email last night. A question related to class size. Dr. McHugh, do you want to handle this one? Let's see here. Generally speaking, how many students will there be in classrooms when they start 4 days a week in person?
It's a great question. As many families know, one of our great points of pride here in Rush-Henrietta is our small class size initiative, which is per district regulation. And we establish class size guidelines for the K-6 level. At the break between first and second semester, we actually went through and rechecked all of our sections at both the hybrid programs as well as the remote learning academy to make sure that they were all within those guidelines, and they were, and that's how we set up our staffing and our classes for second semester. But of course, over the last 3 months, as we've moved through the year, we've had new entrants. There have been transfers, other changes, and so forth. Some kids even coming out of the remote learning academy and going to hybrid. So over time, some of those classes have increased, a few have decreased, and we will have probably a handful of classes at the intermediate level which will slightly exceed the class size guideline. The guideline has a maximum of 23, so as per last week when I last checked, it looks like we probably have about 2 or 3 sections over that amount, over that number at the intermediate buildings. You know, we're keeping our eye on that. We have every confidence that our teachers will be able to meet all the children's needs in that setting. And if for some reason we need to, we can re-examine them and possibly make adjustments, find other spaces to use, potentially split up the classes at various times to make it all work, and of course to stay within compliance of what the health department is asking us to do.
Thank you, Dr. McHugh. We have a COVID testing question, Erlon. Given the increased infection rates in Monroe County, would it be prudent to continue COVID testing even if it is not required by the state?
So in general, COVID-19 testing in the district will continue only for district employees on Wednesday at the TAC. We have been testing since the requirement was put into place, and even when the requirement was lifted, we continued to test. Most of you know that even this week, we continued with the COVID-19 testing. But what we're finding is, again, because when we were required to do the COVID-19 testing, we definitely needed parent permission. And those of you who have given us permission during the time when we needed to, up until today, we thank you. But we're getting into a space right now where we're repeating testing almost every week for the same students. So unless we have new parents give us permission, obviously we have some great procedures and protocols that we have put in place, and that's why we've continued the testing even through this week. However, because we're testing the same students over and over again, it does not make sense. If parents would like it, we are willing to do another survey to have new students be given the opportunity to be tested. We would love to continue that. But as of right now, the fact that we were testing the same students weekly, we felt that it was time, especially when it's not being recommended, to cease with the testing in the buildings, but to still offer the opportunity for any district employees on Wednesday at the Transportation Operations Center, as we have been doing as well, in addition to the building testing that has been going on.
Now, that's a thorough explanation. In short, I think we're the only district in the county that is still testing, even though the requirement isn't in effect. Just to reiterate, it is not a requirement under the new guidance. To this point, hasn't been supported by our local Department of Health. However, as you said, you know, we have the protocols in place at this point. It's not a stretch for us. And so if the guidance and the recommendations change for some reason, then we're more than willing to continue that practice. But as of now, we're going to cease testing students at the end of the week. Given the increased infection rate, that was the same question that we just answered. What was the reason for bringing little kids back rather than the older kids? The older kids are struggling more with work at home and mental health than younger kids. Well, I know some elementary parents that may debate you on that point, whoever submitted the question. However, I think that, I think we've seen across the board, we've seen that there are certain struggles that children are having at all levels, whether it be with academics or mental health. And as I said before, we are committed to bringing all of our students back as soon as possible. The reason that we couldn't bring students back in grades 7 through 12 is because the state guidance doesn't allow us to, because Monroe County sits in what's categorized as a red zone, which means that we have higher than average infection rates here in the greater Rochester area. So while we were able to reduce the distancing in classrooms at the elementary level, we're not able to do that at the high school level, which means that we have to limit the number of students in the building. As I said before, we're still going to try to move forward with our plan to bring secondary students back, but it's going to have to be evaluated on a week-to-week basis. And the infection rates in the area are going to dictate whether or not we can make that happen. So please stay tuned. Why May 7th as a deadline for a return for grades 7 through 12? That seems late, given that there would only be 6 weeks of school left and exams starting. It will take at least 2 weeks for kids to get adjusted. That's a fair point. I think, that would be the final point that we could probably bring students back in our estimation, still make it worthwhile. The other thing that we have to consider, which my counterpart to my left reminded me of just before the session, is that we would need to make sure that the facilities personnel and the people that are going to be readying physical spaces have ample time to make sure that those spaces are ready to go as well. So timing is certainly an issue. We want to give as much lead time to folks as possible, whether we're talking about kids, parents, the people that work in our buildings, and we want to give ourselves every opportunity that we can to reopen. And so, but we feel like if we can't do it within that first week of May, then that would be probably the last point that would make sense for us. But in our estimation, would still give us enough time with kids to make it meaningful. Anything beyond that, we had the conversation at our board meeting last night. We feel like that would probably be the best time to make a decision and allow students to finish the year in the hybrid program. Will transportation for 7 to 12 stay the same as it has been all year long as they remain in hybrid, or must we transport them if we indicate we could on the busing survey? Do you want to speak to that one, Mr. Whitmore?
Certainly. Once we did the survey, because it takes a few weeks to go in and update schedules, we did update schedules for students who indicated they could be self-transported or transported by their parents. If you want the bus pickup, just simply let your school office know and they will contact transportation. Otherwise, the schedule has been updated, so you won't be, your stop is not indicated in our system anymore, so you won't be picked up. Unless, of course, there's other kids who are scheduled at that stop, then we would certainly be willing to pick you up. But please contact either your school office or the transportation department immediately if you indicated that you will self-transport and you have not been up till this point.
Thank you. Dr. McHugh, you're in charge of the district calendar. Any calendar changes that parents need to be aware of? For example, are there any changes to the end of the year calendar?
As of this point, there are no changes to the end of the year calendar for K-6. Unless we get different guidance from the state on that, the calendar should remain as was published. At the 7-12 level, we are going to be communicating very shortly to our staff and families some changes that are resulting from last week's guidance from the state ed department with regard to Regents exams. They are changing some of the administration of Regents exams. Not all the exams are going to be offered. So some of the days that we're going to hold Regents exams are going to be no longer Regents exam days. But that should not affect student attendance, except for the fact that in 8th grade through 12th grade, they won't need to attend for exams on those days.
Okay, thank you. Can you commit to notifying junior and senior high school parents by Wednesday if the district decides to open the following Monday? Yes. Today is Wednesday, and I can tell you that we're not going to be opening this Monday, but we'll evaluate the situation next week. And if it looked like we were going to be able to reopen on, I guess that would be the 26th, then we would commit to notifying you before Wednesday. But we'll have to see what happens. In order, even if we were to be able to reopen on the 26th, that would mean that cases would have to fall really quickly. I can say one of the ideas that we're discussing with the local Department of Health is a more nuanced approach to the way that we're zoned. So currently as a county, we're in the red zone. Everybody's red right now based on the newest statistics. But in areas of the county where rates drop significantly and certain school districts have schools eventually that are no longer in what's considered to be red, and could apply the new distancing requirements and wouldn't necessarily be held to certain cohorting requirements, they're called, sort of separating students at different points of the day. We're requesting that those schools be considered for reopening. And that is something that the local Department of Health has been open to discussing. And they're working on some different models which may help secondary schools across the county. But at this point, rates would have to fall really, really quickly in order to be ready to reopen on the 26th. But to go back to the original question, we will notify people prior to that Wednesday if we were going to open on a Monday. Is there a local transmission rate that causes elementary kids to have to go back to 2 days, etc.? So I'm interpreting this question to mean, is there a certain threshold that would require us to revert back to hybrid? That hasn't been established. I think, I don't, and I've also been asked the question, do we foresee a scenario where schools get shut down? I don't want to use the word shut down, where schools would have to revert back to a fully remote learning model. And to answer that, I don't necessarily see a scenario where that would happen, where the entire county gets shut down again. I think we know a whole lot more about COVID-19 than we knew a year ago. And as far as reverting back to a hybrid model, I think, I'm reluctant to make a prediction because I haven't been really good at making predictions lately about, what's going to happen and what the state's going to do and things like that. But I even have trouble foreseeing a scenario where we have to revert back. That would be caused by a serious spike in cases well beyond where we are right now. And I think, even in a scenario where you see a serious spike, even the types of spikes that we saw around the holidays earlier this year, like Thanksgiving and Christmas and around the New Year, when things were really popping off in the county, I think there would be an approach where we would work with the Department of Health, and if you had to, quarantine a cluster of individuals within the school community, then we would work with those folks and their family. If you had to quarantine a classroom, or even if you had to possibly shut down a building, which, again, things would have to be really, really drastic in order for the Department of Health to take those sorts of measures, then I think that they would take that approach before they said, geez, you really should just take the entire organization and go back to a hybrid model or go fully remote. So I think the approach is going to be a bit more subtle going forward. Let's see, what do we have in the chat? Okay, what are the chances of no masks in the fall? And will there be an option for remote parents and teens not comfortable with that? Okay, so I'm going to answer the first part. I predict, reluctantly, that we will have to, that there will be some masking requirements even in the fall. I think that, you know, I have trouble foreseeing a situation where students and teachers and staff members and administrators are not wearing masks. Will they be as stringent as they are right now? That we aren't sure of, but I do believe there will be some masking requirements. You know, I want to involve our capable Assistant Superintendent for Instruction and Curriculum, Miss Dina Wilson, to talk about what we are anticipating as far as, you know, a remote option for the fall. And again, you know, this isn't a perfect science, but some things that we're discussing and some plans that more than likely will be in place, at least to a certain degree. I'm going to let you speak to that.
Did you make up that question so I could participate this evening?
Maybe.
In regards to remote learning, at the current time, the state has not given us any information indicating that they would require it, nor have they told us that, that we won't be offering it. So at this point in time, we are anticipating that there is a likelihood that we would still be offering it as an option if the state does require us to do that. The good news is we have learned a lot this year offering remote education to our students. We're in the process of doing a program evaluation of the Remote Learning Academy. We will be taking all the feedback that occurred in the study that we did looking at various components of it so that we can identify how best to offer remote learning in the event that we're required to do it. So we anticipate to know more about that towards the end of the school year, and then we will proceed accordingly, informing parents of that option if need be.
Thank you for that explanation. Looks like, you know, the flurry in the chat has slowed a little bit, so this gives us an opportunity to talk a little bit about meals, Mr. Whitmore. Is there anything the parents should know about some of the lunch choices or opportunities for free lunches, things like that?
Yeah, this is a great reminder. We will be serving free meals for the remainder of this school year. So the federal government has authorized that. So your child does not need to pay for a meal. They'll still be free. Because the menus are set in advance, they are set up for as if we were in hybrid still, which means we offer the same meal choices Monday, Tuesday, and then Thursday, Friday. So it won't be quite as many choices as you're used to on a full school day. But each day there still are at least a couple of choices. And if you like the meal, you can have the same meal 2 days in a row. But we do encourage folks to take advantage of the free meals. And because we're pre-trained the options, the state has relieved the guideline where typically the child has to pick each of the options. Now we're allowed to pre-tray, so the lunch lines are moving very quickly. There's no stacking up with the lunch lines. Your kids can get through quickly, and the meal is free, so take advantage.
Thank you very much for that PSA.
Yes.
Ms. Anselm,
Yes,
this would be another opportunity for a shameless plug.
sure.
Do you want to talk a little bit about Cup Care?
I'd love to.
Okay.
First of all, thank you to all of the parents since the last e-news communication when we were giving you the indication that we were possibly going to open 4 days. You have been calling. My staff in Cup Care at Good Shepherd indicated that they've been busy. We are excited to be receiving your children. So, and for those of you who are looking for a Cup Care option, We have that available. Please give us a call. They are willing, able, and ready to accept your calls. So please call. And also on Wednesdays, we have a full day care opportunity as well at Good Shepherd. So if you're looking to do anything on Wednesdays, we have that available too. Bonnie Coddington is our coordinator, and we're ready.
Okay, very good. Looks like we're starting to get some traction again with Cub Care, and
Yes.
families are contacting us over there at Good Shepherd, so we're excited about that. We do have a question in the chat related to vaccination expectations. Are there any vaccination expectations for faculty and staff for this change with double capacity in buildings? So let me say first and foremost, we are not allowed to require staff members to get vaccinations, but we have certainly encouraged teachers, staff, administrators, anyone working in our schools to get the vaccine if that's something that they want to do. We've tried to provide opportunities for them to have access to it. And at this point, I believe during our last survey, we had, I think, 2 out of every 3 teachers and a little more than half of our staff overall who are vaccinated. So we continue to work with the Department of Health so that those who want to be vaccinated can get an appointment. But again, we're not able as an organization to require that folks are vaccinated. I don't know, from an HR perspective, is there anything that I left out, Dr. McHugh?
No, that's really it. We've encouraged it. We're pleased that the numbers are steadily rising every year, every week, because the superintendent sends out a mini survey every week to our staff so that we can monitor the vaccination rate, and we are seeing a steady increase and hoping that that continues.
Thank you. Do kids in K-6 have to wear face shields? They do not have to wear face shields. I guess we could let parents know, however, that on our buses, in cases where parents have indicated that they would allow their children to sit with another child for the last 15 minutes of a ride, we will offer face shields to families who would like them when they are seated on the bus with another child for just the last part of a ride, if they've given us permission to do that. This will be a good time. People often ask Andy, Mr. Whitmore, about some of our cleaning and disinfecting procedures. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, for the whole year, we've had very enhanced cleaning and disinfecting. So the custodian throughout the day goes and use disinfecting wipes on high-touch areas, whether it's drinking fountains or lavatory doors. And more importantly, in each classroom every night, every desk does get cleaned, individually cleaned thoroughly, and the whole room and every piece of furniture gets disinfected. So we'll continue that process now with double the amount of desks. It is taking us longer because each one is hand cleaned every night. But our crew's been working hard, and sometimes they're working extra hours, but that process will continue. On the buses, it's similar. After each run, we have little foggers on the bus, disinfecting foggers, and so the bus is disinfected after each run. So they're kept clean as well. We are, now that the weather's warmer, we're encouraging drivers to crack the windows again to increase ventilation. The good news at elementary, even though we now have the authorization to go to 2/3 capacity, which means 2 per seat. The vast majority of our elementary runs will still remain single. And if you're a parent who indicated on the survey you do not want your child doubled up, we certainly won't do that. There are only a few number of cases where we will have to double up, and that'll only happen if you as a parent indicate on the survey you're willing to do that. And as the superintendent mentioned, it'll be towards the end of the ride, so it won't be for a long period of time.
Thank you for that information. Ms. Dina Wilson, we talked a little bit about what families may expect as far as remote learning in the fall. Again, you know, we're making some predictions because there hasn't been specific guidance that's come out around remote learning, but anything that you feel like from an instructional standpoint parents may need to have on the radar either this spring or even as they think about beyond?
I think most importantly, we want to reassure parents that we have worked really hard this year in the hybrid model and as we transition into the 4-day model to continue to offer a quality educational program. We have really identified the most essential aspects of our curriculum and making sure that we're still teaching to the state standards. We continue to assess students to ensure that we are getting information on how well they are meeting those standards. And most importantly, knowing that there was a disruption last spring and knowing that this year the learning environments varied from day to day, that we are using that assessment information to identify any gaps in learning and any reinforcement that needs to occur. So at the elementary level, it's a positive that we are coming back 4 days a week because we all know, especially with our younger children, that when they're in person, we can address the interventions much easier than what we are doing remotely. So I think parents, number one, should rest assured that our teachers have done an excellent job still delivering the curriculum. And as students come back and as we identify any additional gaps in learning that we weren't addressing, we will continue to put interventions in place for the students. We are in the place of preparing for next fall, because you did ask about next fall. We are anticipating that there might be some additional interventions that may need to occur that don't normally occur. So with that increase in numbers, Dr. McHugh and I have worked with the principals to identify some anticipated need, and we'll be providing additional personnel where necessary in the areas of literacy and math. So I think the most important thing, Superintendent Wright, for parents to know is that we are carefully monitoring our students. And I encourage any parent who does have a concern and is seeing something that maybe the teacher hasn't noticed yet, please always communicate with the teacher first. And we are more than happy to continue to work with the families and our students to ensure that we are giving each student exactly what they need to address their learning.
Okay, thank you for that information. We do have another question in the chat, but it looks like activity is really slowing. So what we'll do once we get through this question and do final thoughts, if no other questions come in, we'll give a little bit of teacher wait time. But if we don't have any more questions, then we'll end a few minutes early. But this question says, I greatly appreciate the fact that we're increasing going back to school, but why the decision to go back 4 days versus 5 days? And this is a question that we talked about a little earlier. Ultimately, you know, there are a few reasons. One is that we currently use Wednesdays as an opportunity to provide intervention for those students who need it remotely, and we think that that's valuable time that we didn't want to lose. It also is a day where we manage the physical space in buildings in terms of deep cleaning, disinfecting, arranging the physical space, whether it be in common areas or in classrooms, and we wanted to make sure that we continued to have that time. But the bigger issue really was centered around scheduling, because the Remote Learning Academy is on a 4-day schedule. If we went to a 5-day schedule, we share staff in between those two models, and we wouldn't have been able to do that. Can't have one model on a 4-day schedule and the other on a 5-day schedule. It would cause problems for us. So that is the reason that we didn't go to a 5-day-a-week in-person model. Let's see, another question in the chat. How are students being supported in handling the social emotional component of this transition?
Absolutely, that is.
Access to counselors, some examples, incorporating wellness activities, more outside time, mass breaks, etc.
And as you know, throughout the year, that's been a focus. That is something that we are aware of and have been implementing in all of the buildings. That will not change. We are excited about the opportunity to have the students in the building because there are times where when they are away, it's harder to assess, but the fact that they'll be with us in the buildings, mental health, mental wellness, not only for students, but staff, has been of the utmost importance since we opened school. We knew that. And as they are returning, that will continue to be the main focus. So counselors, social workers, as we have said since the beginning, it is all hands on deck, and it will continue to be until the end of the school year. And even when we are preparing to return, it will continue to be as well. So expect that it is at the forefront, and it's our #1 priority at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Anselm. Ms. Wilson, does the school have a list of resources for this spring and summer for students who may need extra support but don't necessarily qualify for services?
Well, first of all, I'll start with our secondary level. We are participating in the county summer school in the event that any student does not pass a necessary course. We're hoping that will not be the case. We're working really hard to have our secondary students complete all their course requirements. But in the event that a student does not complete a course, they may participate in our summer school program, which we partner with other schools as part of a county initiative and summer school program. At the elementary level, we do have resources available. I do know that the principals have worked with our program directors in identifying some additional online resources that could be available over the summer. I know that principals and teachers are working on sending some of those resources out in June. We are having our students keep their Chromebooks over the summer, and that will allow them to be able to participate on those online web-based programs that they've been using all year long, that the teachers may set up a schedule for them to participate in over the summer. If you are looking for some additional programs and support systems, reach out to classroom teachers and they can work with the principals to make sure you get that additional information.
Okay, thank you. The activity in the chat has really slowed, so this is the last opportunity to ask a question. And at this point, I'll just open it up for any final thoughts. We'll just do a quick around the horn, starting with Dr. McHugh.
No, nothing except to say that our teachers and staff are working really hard over the next 2 days to be ready to welcome back all our youngsters in the K-6 buildings, and we're very excited to have them together again.
Very good, thank you.
And I would say thank you to all of the parents who have been participating in the Raptor screening. We thank you for whenever we call upon you, you answer the call, so we appreciate that. So please, if you haven't been doing the screening, we implore you, please, this is the time. We need you. We can't do this without you. So thank you again.
Thank you. Mr. Whitmore?
And likewise, staff is very excited to have the kids back, and I just want to remind parents, it'll be like first day of school on our buses on Monday, so they will be delayed. The good news is the bus routes really aren't changing. Some of the parents asked for changes early on because their cohort, the stop might on the opposite day might not have been there. So what we did, we kept the routes the same. And now that both cohorts are coming in, the route is laid out, but with double the number of kids. It is going to adjust timing. So we appreciate your patience and forbearance. And if it's more than 20 minutes behind schedule, certainly feel free to call the transportation department. But we do expect some timing differences for the first few days till we get it ironed out.
Thank you.
I agree. We need to give a shout out to our parents, not only helping us with the house screenings, but we know you've also been an extension of our instructional program this year and helping students at home and working closely with teachers when we need your support to have our students complete their assignments and so forth. Shout out to the teachers and staff. I also do want to compliment our school and district administrators. Quite often, they're the ones on the front line and working many hours behind the scenes, and they don't get the recognition they need. So I do want to take this opportunity to know that the reopening of schools has required a lot of their work, and so when you see your principals or various district administrators, make sure you acknowledge their work as well as our teaching staff. And the last and the most important thing is our students. Our students have really adjusted, have been flexible, and they have really stayed focused. And we really, really appreciate all that you've done so that the students come to school every day ready to learn and continue to work really hard to be the best they can be. So we are quite proud of our entire school community.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Wilson. On that note, I think we'll close out the session. I want to thank our community relations team and our staff members who helped us organize tonight's event and manage the chat and live stream this so that folks at home could participate and ask questions. Thank you for being here with us tonight. And thank you for all that you've done throughout the course of the year. If there are any questions that you still have after this session, please feel free to reach out to us through the Contact Us button on the website. Again, thank you and have a great evening.